Now, only one of those calls to police actually had a physical description. It's believed to be a male in his 40s or 50s, about 5'4", of Hispanic descent with a mustache. The San Luis Obispo Police Department urges anyone with information on the prowler in this neighborhood or another to contact them immediately. Live and local here in San Luis Obispo, Pearce Bley, KSBY News. Believe it or not, the answer, according to winemakers, is no. Over 500,000 tons of grapes are produced annually here on the Central Coast. And while the lack of rain may not be affecting the quality of your Chardonnay or Merlot that you sip on tonight, what happens a few years down the road is what worries winemakers. Will urges everyone to dedicate a little room in their garden for a few milkweed plants, and you can actually pick up some seeds tomorrow for free during Monarch Recognition Day down at the Grove. It's off of the Pacific Coast Highway in Pismo Beach. They'll have a parade, cake, and other festivities, so make sure to get on down there. Live and local in San Luis Obispo tonight, Pearce Bley, KSBY News. Yeah, I did, Jeanette. The plane has been confirmed as a 1958 Morrissey 2150. That's a small experimental aircraft. KSBY has also learned that there was a hangar at Santa Maria Airport registered to David Casey. That's where he and an unidentified passenger at this time took off from around 1:30 p.m. Tuesday. Now, as for the plane that they were flying, just because it was classified as experimental does not mean that it was unsafe.
Most people get this vision of some crackpot in his garage slapping an airplane together.
Paul Kendrick is no crackpot. He's been flying experimental planes for almost 15 years and says that just because you build it yourself doesn't mean that there's a higher risk of crashing.
It really isn't the case. And that's why, like I say, experimental is a misnomer.
The plane that crashed off the coast of Oceano Tuesday was considered experimental, but I was curious what that meant. So
I decided to take a ride myself.
Parts are bought from a manufacturer and put together by the pilot, but it still must be inspected thoroughly.
Still has to have safety requirements. It still has to be inspected prior to flight by either the FAA or a designated airworthiness representative.
So how much time does it take before it's ready to fly?
I've got about 2,000 hours of working time invested in building this. I spread that over about 7 years.
But the time required to build one doesn't seem to be affecting their popularity.
There are more of these airplanes flying every day, new ones flying every day from people that have completed kits than pretty much any other airplane in the world right now.
Now, it should be mentioned that the plane that Paul and I went up in today was not the same make or model that crashed off the coast of Oceano on Tuesday, but at least from that video, you can get a little bit of a sense of how small that cockpit really is and how difficult it would be to move around there in an emergency situation. Police are no closer to identifying the prowler than they were when the first call came in mid-December, but they're hoping that if the public stays informed on their safety and keeps an eye out, they might be able to catch him. Now, I talked with a few people in the governor's office today. They say he has 30 days to make a decision. He's going to spend that time looking over the qualifications of the nominees.
Pearce, you checked out some of the streets, you drove around, you talked to people. Well, what's the situation there?
John, I talked to about 4 or 5 residents today, and they all told me the same thing. It is long overdue that the roads here in Grover Beach were fixed. Now, the total estimate on those repairs is about $35 to $40 million, which one way or another will come out of the wallets of those residents.
I think streets has always been an issue for the city of Grover Beach.
Grover Beach City Manager Bob Peralt says they need to find a way to repair their roads, and fast.
If you go back and look at it historically, we've got 44 miles of streets, 9.5 million square feet.
The city's general fund resources are just over $7 million. But according to the Public Works Department, it would take about a quarter of that every year to maintain streets properly.
The underlying funding base isn't sufficient to actually allow funds to repair the infrastructure of that size.
Funding for repairs on more commonly used roads such as 4th Street or Oak Park Boulevard will come from the state. But as for residential neighborhoods, that money is going to have to come from the residents of Grover Beach.
When we started to crunch the numbers a little bit, it looked like the very most it could ever be in any case would be about $75 a month.
The City Council met in December to discuss ways to pay for the repairs. Possible solutions include a general bond or formations of assessment districts.
That's why it's important just to get people out to make sure that they are on board with this, or if they're not, that we wouldn't move forward and spend the money on it.
The City Council begins their meeting at 6:30 p.m. That's about 20 minutes away. It'll be right here at City Hall in Grover Beach. The public is encouraged to attend, to voice their opinions, and to hear more details about those different financing options that the city is looking at. Ogren's Free College Workshop begins at 1 p.m. right here at the San Luis Obispo County Public Library, so make sure to get here on time. The FAA tells me that there are 2 registered aircraft to a David B. Casey in Friday Harbor, Washington. Both of those aircraft are small, fixed-engine, single-wing planes, and they're both considered experimental, meaning you can buy the parts from a manufacturer and then build it yourself. Local airports could not confirm whether Casey took off or landed in the past week, but David Gibbs of Roche Harbor Airport in Washington, that's close to Friday Harbor Airport, told me that there is a David B. Casey who owns property near their airport. We'll have more on this as the story develops. Live and local here in Avila Beach tonight, Pearce Bley, KSBY News. Well, John, like you said, it is the first of its kind in the country, and what does that mean for students? Well, it means they get to play with some pretty cool toys and get to use some words that I have to look up in the dictionary. But more important than that, it means that they can get on a career path towards a career in cybersecurity the minute they step on campus.
I'm encrypting the Cal Poly logo here.
Students at Cal Poly are pumped about their new cybersecurity lab.
It's a really nice lab.
Really cool and very high tech.
Awesome.
John Vasquez is a senior engineering major and says he can't wait for class to start.
Malware, encryption, we're going to look at like software security, how to build secure software.
Confused yet? Don't worry, I had to look up what that meant too. It basically is what keeps your stuff safe online. The Northrop Grumman Foundation, a leading cybersecurity company, provided funding for the hardware and software.
They've been very insightful in giving us in the Ivory Tower some real-world perspective. They've been very generous in contributing not only the equipment, but also some of their curricular materials.
And that equipment can turn the lab into a war room.
This is designed so that these banks of monitors flip around, and that can be the command and control center, and we can run a ribbon down the middle, and so you have 2 teams kind of battling each other, one doing attack and one doing defense.
This is some pretty high-tech stuff, something Vasquez and the other students can't wait to get their hands on.
Yeah, that's basically Cal Poly's motto. So learn by doing, and one of the labs we're working on now is basically doing crypto stuff by actually programming.
Now, Peterson is the only faculty member teaching in the lab at this point. He says he hopes a few more professors are hired over the next few years so that they can be the first at something else, and that is developing the only undergraduate major in cybersecurity. If you want to build something along the shores of the Golden State, you have to go through the Coastal Commission. But not everyone seems to know that.
Coastal Commission? No. Nothing at all, man.
Nothing at all.
Never even heard of it.
The commission is looking to fill a seat that represents San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties.
For us, it's very important. We're all coastal communities, so for any of us, Pismo Beach, Oceano, Morro Bay, the Coastal Commission makes a big difference to what we can do and what we can't do.
Grover Beach Mayor Debbie Peterson was nominated by the mayors of San Luis Obispo County and says the governor will have a tough time making a decision.
Presumably he's looking for people who are eager to serve, who have a passion for the environment and balancing environment, recreation, and access.
According to the nominees, the commission must strike a balance between protecting the environment and encouraging development.
At times, there's been some issues with are they leaning too far one way environmentally or leaning too far towards development.
Also nominated are Ventura Mayor Pro Tem Carmen Ramirez, Port Hueneme Mayor Jonathan Sharkey, and Goleta Mayor Michael Bennett.
We need to make decisions based on what will best protect the coast, but will also serve the interest of the residents.
With the lack of rainfall, and in all likelihood we're going to see a little less production of the grapes. The total crop will probably be down a bit.
Steve Autry has been making wine for almost a decade, but this is one of the worst droughts he's ever seen.
Like I say, the availability could become less. It might mean that I produce a little less wine until we get some decent rainfall again.
Winery owners and viticulturalists on the Central Coast may have to sacrifice quantity for quality.
Vineyard managers really get to know what their piece of dirt that they're farming is all about, and how to best bring out what they can.
Chris Toronto says those running vineyards are already prepared for a drought like this to happen.
With so many wine grapes, actually the way they're farmed is through deficient irrigation, basically saying we got to give them as little water as possible so that way they're extracting the most that they can out of the land.
But what they can get out of the land now will eventually end up in your glass in 2 or 3 years.
I've been through several different drought cycles and seen how it plays out, and Mother Nature always seems to come through in the end. We'll see how she does this time.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how worried are winemakers about the lack of rain?
I'll give it a good 6 or 7.